Alright, we have looked at solving quadratics by graphing. We have looked at solving quadratics by factoring. Today we're going to learn a third method. This will be, as you'll notice, it says when there's no x term. Look here, ax squared plus c, that bx, that linear term, is missing. Okay? So it looks like this. X squared minus 49 equals 0. Now you might notice this is a difference of squares, right? We could factor this. We could solve this one by factoring. But we're going to learn a new method. Step 1 is to isolate x squared. So we're going to add 49 to both sides, and we get x squared equals 49. Okay? Now, we are asking ourselves what number squared equals 49. Well, if you'll remember, there are two numbers squared that are 49. And what we're actually doing is we are taking the square root of both sides. So we're going to take the square root of the left side, and we're going to take the square root of the right. Because whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. One thing to notice here, the inverse of squaring is taking the square root. Okay, these are inverse operations. That's why we do this. One undoes the other. So the square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 49 is 7, but we have to put this plus and minus in front of it. We should probably put a little plus and minus up here, okay? But if you just put a plus and minus with your answer, I'll be good. Because we talked about this a long time ago with perfect squares. Positive 7 squared is 49. Negative 7 times negative 7 is positive 49. So that's how we get our two answers. If we were to graph this quadratic, here's 7, here's negative 7, this one's pointing up, this does something like that, okay? It crosses at 7 and negative 7. Okay, let's look at another one. X squared minus 16 equals 0. We're going to add 16 to both sides. We get x squared is 16. What's the inverse of squaring? Taking the square root. What's the square root of 16? 4, but we have to remember that it is a plus or minus 4. Positive 4 squared is 16. Negative 4 squared is 16. All right? Now, let's skip over to number 3 here. Let's isolate my x squared. I'm going to subtract 25 from both sides, and I get x squared equals negative 25. Now, a couple of things here. First of all, when can you square a number? When can you multiply a number by itself and get a negative? You can't, because a positive times a positive would be a positive, and a negative times a negative would be a positive. Also, if you were to put negative 25 in your calculator and try to take the square root, what's it going to do? It's going to tell you no can do. All right? So if you get the squared, when you isolate x squared and you get a negative, your answer is no solution. All right, I want you to take a second. I want you to work 2, 4, 5, and 6, and then check them when you get done. Okay, let's look at a few that are a little different. Look at number 7. 6x squared equals 54. What's the first thing we have to do? We have to isolate x squared. How are we going to do that? We're going to divide both sides by 6. We get x squared equals 9. Once the squared term is isolated, then you can take the square root of both sides. Here we would get x is plus or minus 3. Okay? This one I want to change. Mark this out and write this problem down. 9x squared minus 16 equals 0. Okay? Now, let's do the same thing. We're going to isolate x squared. This is like a two-step equation, right? We're going to add 16 to both sides. We get 9x squared equals 16. We're going to divide both sides by 9. And we get x squared equals 16 over 9. Now, we have done square roots of fractions. It tends to freak you out every time you see it, but we've done this. So let's see if we can remember. Let's take the square root of both sides. And how do we take the square root of a fraction? Well, we take the square root of the top. The square root of 16 is 4. Square root of 9 is 3. Don't forget to put your plus or minus. Since we're squaring, the answer can be positive or negative. All right? Now, number 9, let's look at 3/4 x squared equals 12. Let's see what you remember. Do you remember how to get rid of that fraction in front of the variable? What do? We're going to flip and multiply. So we're going to multiply both sides by 4/3. Fraction in front of a variable, multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So we end up with x squared. What happens over here? We get some canceling going on. We get x squared is 16, and we get square root of both sides. X is plus or minus the square root of 16, which is 4. Okay? All right, you try 10, 11, 12, then turn the video back on and see how you did. All right, I got plus or minus 10 for number 10, plus or minus 12 for number 11, and plus or minus 2 for number 12. Okay? One thing I forgot to mention that I should have talked about, when we get up here and we get these no solution answers, do you remember what that parabola looks like? If we were to graph this parabola, what would happen? Remember, when there's no solution, it does not cross the x-axis. So these would be parabolas. Since they're pointing up, they would have to be above the x-axis going up, and they would not cross. Okay? All right, well, we will practice tomorrow with solving by square roots.